Welcome back to this special version of America Votes 2016. I'm Ed Berliner. We're focusing on the Indiana primary, or as it is called in some circles, when will the madness end and the Cleveland party planning begin? Let us see if indeed we are there right now. Let's go ahead and check out the numbers as we have them in. Remember, only a certain number of polls closed at 6 o'clock Eastern time because they are in Central Time, a small portion of Indiana. They will all finish closing at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Let's go ahead and update this now. This is with about 63 of the total 74 precincts reporting. Donald Trump with about a 53% lead right now. Ted Cruz 33%, and John Kasich sitting in at 10%. A lot of what's coming in right now is around the Fort Wayne area. Let's go ahead and check the Democratic side of things right now. 67 of those precincts coming in right now. Hillary Clinton with about 55% of the vote, and Bernie Sanders hanging in 45% of the vote. And again, very, very early indeed. All right, your phone calls will be part of this discourse within moments. 1-877-Newsmax. First, let us welcome back the veteran political analyst and best-selling author, Dick Morris, joins us once again right here on our special. Dick, let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump and the way he does things, because there's been some talk about this whole issue that he accused Ted Cruz's dad of being with Lee Harvey Oswald before the Kennedy assassination, handing out pro-Fidel Castro pamphlets in New Orleans, 1963. It has been called garbage by more people than we can possibly count. But isn't it just that he enjoys this? He uses this. He needles his opponents, and he gets to bait him, and that's why he does this.
Yeah, I think that's true. I can't think of any other reason for him to do that, but to get under their skin. It's almost a form of sadism. But I don't. Ted. It's worth remembering, just in terms of the Indiana numbers we're seeing now, that Cruz's strength is in the southern part of the state and in Indianapolis. Trump's strength is in the northern and, in particular, northwestern part of the state. So it's hard to tell what's coming in and what's not, but it's worth noting that. In other words, until we get more, you can't really tell what's going on with Indiana. But the more Trump surges to victory, the more I'm developing a theory of Donald Trump that's a little different than what I've had before and what I think anyone's spoken about. I think that if you want a parallel to Donald Trump, you don't go back to Ronald Reagan. You go back further to Dwight Eisenhower. In 1952, the conservative movement in the Republican Party was determined to nominate their candidate, a guy named Bob Taft from Ohio, who was the Ted Cruz of his time. He had run 3 times before. Each time he was eclipsed in his bid for the nomination by a moderate Republican, Thomas E. Dewey or Wendell Willkie. And now he was determined to win the nomination and appeared to have it in hand. And then Eisenhower came in from out of nowhere. He was stationed in Brussels as the NATO commander and won a series of primaries, New Hampshire by a write-in, and surged to the nomination. And Eisenhower was not a conservative. He was a nationalist. He basically bet that Americans were not just sick of New Deal and Fair Deal liberalism, they were sick of ideology, period. And they didn't want to get into the ideological weeds anymore. They just wanted someone who would act in the national interest, be powerful enough not to be controlled by special interests, and be enough of a manager and administrator to know how to be president. And they felt that Eisenhower filled those qualifications, and he did rather well. And I think the conservative angst about Trump not being conservative enough, the bathroom issue, or is he really pro-choice, or all that stuff, I think they're going to be disappointed. I think he probably is not as conservative as they would hope that he would be. But I think he could be a very good president. And I think what we're looking at now is the transcending of ideology on both the Democratic and the Republican side. On the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders is left out in the cold as Hillary racks up victories. And on the right-wing side, Ted Cruz is left in the cold as Donald Trump is racking up victories. And I think it speaks to a pragmatism of the American voter, as opposed to an ideological polarization.
All right, let us now go ahead and see what the American public thinks about all this, because earlier in the program you said you believe that Ted Cruz should stay right in the race. 1-877-Newsmax. Natalie from Portsmouth, Arkansas. Natalie, thanks for joining Dick Morris, Ed Berliner on the Hard Line. You think Ted Cruz should drop out. Why?
Yes, I do, sir. I watched today as Ted Cruz and Fox News turned a comment Trump made about the absurd stories in the National Enquirer. Ted took that little bitty comment and turned it into a conspiracy theory, which was never meant and never suggested by Donald Trump. What is worse to me is that Fox News then returned and offered this story as a late-breaking news fact.
Well,
And
let's
that
put it
was
this way. There's a lot of news organizations out there who will put breaking news on just about anything these days because they have to use the banner at least 497 times a day. But let us get to this right here. The whole point here is, though, and okay, Dick, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, man.
No, it's Natalie from Portsmouth, Arkansas. Go ahead.
Hey, Natalie. I don't know if I met you in my Arkansas years, but I wish I had. The National Enquirer is run by a guy named David Pecker, who is a close friend of Donald Trump's. And about the time that the fight was brewing over the naked pictures of Donald's wife, the National Enquirer ran a story very helpful to Trump, unfair to Cruz and maybe untrue, about a list of women he supposedly had affairs with. And I think we can probably dismiss that as untrue because none of the women spoke out or were interviewed or anything like that. The story just dropped. And it's not far-fetched to believe that if the National Enquirer ran a story like that, that there was a Trump-based conspiracy behind it. Now, why he's doing that when he's wrapping up the nomination, I don't know.
Natalie, let's put it this way. Wouldn't you prefer that, and I would take it, let me just guess, Natalie, you're a Donald Trump supporter, yes?
Yes, I am.
Would you not then prefer that Donald Trump, whom you believe should be the next president of the United States, spend more time talking about the country instead of throwing out completely discredited stories from a rag like the National Enquirer?
Yes, and I understand that. I 100%. I'm also talking about a man who has accomplishments that are quite directed to what the United States needs right now, and that is economic growth.
Then wouldn't you rather he talk about that instead of talking about rumors from a garbage rag like the National Enquirer?
I suppose that is true. I would like to hear. I do hear. I watch every day. My main beef actually is hearsay comments that are turned into late-breaking news.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. And again, I appreciate your call, but let's say this on the way out when you talk about, Dick, I think you'll agree with me on this, when we're talking about things that become breaking news. First of all, you said it exactly right. That whole story in the National Enquirer about Ted Cruz's mistresses, whatever you want to call them, there's been absolutely nothing since then. It has dropped. There's no evidence. There's nothing to it. And there's no evidence to this story. Yes?
But you know what, Natalie, my advice to you is take your copy of the National Enquirer and wrap fish in it.
By the way, Dick, I've had some experience over the years. I think even fish would be insulted at this point to be wrapped in the National Enquirer. John from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at 1-877-Newsmax joins us. John, thanks for joining Ed Berliner and Dick Morris. You believe that Ted Cruz should stay in the race, yes?
Hey, John, how are you
doing?
doing?
I do. Yes, sir, I do. By the way, my name's Sean, not John.
Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Any real conservative knows that Donald Trump is a big New York City progressive through and through, okay? And a couple of examples. The transgender comment last week, he feels that they should be able to use any bathroom they please. Okay, that's strike one. Strike two was a really big one at one of the former debates where when he was asked the three main functions of the government, he only got one right, which was security. The other two, he said he believes the government should provide housing and health care. Now, and during this whole time that he's been campaigning, he's been using Saul Alinsky tactics on Ted Cruz just to get him to shut up. So in my opinion, the most hated man in this campaign is the right one for the job, the constitutional expert, Ted Cruz.
John, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Dick, go ahead. Comment on that.
Well, John, I think that's true. I just don't think that, you know, these guys have invested years of their lives, tens of millions of dollars of other people's money, huge amounts of political credibility by various political leaders in their candidacy. They at least owe it to them to run it out, not to give up halfway through the 100-yard dash. On the other end, if you're asking me who's going to cross the finish line first, I think it's going to be Trump. But in these two comments from Natalie and from Sean, we really have the epitome of this campaign. Natalie is talking about Trump as a national leader who can do the things the country needs. Sean is saying that he's not a true conservative who could vindicate the conservative ideology. I think they're both absolutely right.
All right, let's move on. Richard from White Plains, who says he knows people who has worked with Donald Trump, and they don't really like him very much. Richard, I got about 45 seconds. You're on.
Hello again, Ed. I'd like to remind everyone that it was Donald Trump with his rancor and personal attacks, starting with Jeb Bush, that has set the all-time low for this primary. Cruz has been trying to stick to the issues while Trump launches his childish ad hominem attacks. So to criticize Ted Cruz for finally telling the truth about Trump being a liar and a narcissist is ridiculous. Trump is a ruthless, win-at-all-costs bully with no character and no principles.
We appreciate your call very much. Thanks for joining us. Dick, I only got about 30 seconds left. You can say all that, but Donald Trump is on his way to the nomination.
Yeah, look, Indiana was a fair fight. They spent about the same amount of money. It was nobody's home state. Nobody had a leg up over anybody else. The governor even endorsed Cruz. And if Cruz can't win in Indiana, I'm not sure he can win anywhere right now.
We're going to find out because the numbers keep coming in. 7 o'clock Eastern time is when the polls all do close. Dick Morris, pleasure to talk to you again, my friend. Thanks so much. I know you're going to be appearing throughout the night right here on Newsmax as we go through America Votes, and we'll get a chance to talk to you again real soon. Well, Ted Cruz took a dicey gamble yesterday talking to Indiana voters. We'll talk about that and much more, and his comments from today as well, your comments as well. This is the backbone of America Votes 2016. This special, 1-877-NEWSMAX. 1-877-NEWSMAX. We roll through the night. We head towards the end of the Indiana primary, and Ted Cruz, having been told by certain people in the GOP, you don't win this one, you're out. Let's see what happens. Stay with us. America Votes 2016 continues.